Welcome to episode 2 of my road trip through the American South that I got to do with my buddy Evan this past spring. If you missed the last video from Congaree National Park, feel free to go check that out first. Here we make our way to the Appalachian Mountains of North and South Carolina to bang out tons and tons of waterfalls. It'll be a longer video than usual, so grab your popcorn. Before we get started, I want to rewind to the summer of 2024 where I took my first ever hiking trip to the region. It's also when I did my first hike with Evan, which sparked a friendship that would lead to many future trips. Of course, Evan is local to the area, so he knows of many more waterfalls than I do in the Carolinas. If you're familiar with any of these spots, you'll notice the order at which we visit them is pretty random, and that's because we use his home base as our accommodation for the 3 days I was in his neck of the woods. Yes, technically it was a big detour on our road trip, but hotels in this part of the Appalachians, referred to as the Blue Ridge Mountains, can be rather expensive. Anyways, as I was saying before going off on that tangent, was I previously uploaded a video titled Chasing Waterfalls in the Carolinas, and it's one that I was very proud of as I thought I got a great feel for the area. But that was before I knew of how many more huge falls it had to offer. It's amazing to me that the Southeast gets to claim one of the highest densities of waterfalls in the United States, maybe the highest outside of like Oregon. So now I present to you chasing more waterfalls in the Carolinas, and who knows, maybe as I continue visiting Evan, this will become a series on my channel. During these 3 days, we prioritized waterfalls that neither Evan nor I had seen before, meaning most of them are not super well known. But there's also a few in here that were more or less en route that Evan didn't mind returning to, so we occasionally cram those into our itinerary as well. We begin at North Carolina's Bear Lake Reserve for a set of enormous waterfalls that get extremely few visitors, and there's a good reason for that. The only way to reach Souls Creek Falls and Flat Creek Falls is by kayaking or canoeing up Bear Creek Lake. You'll want to reserve online in advance, either 2 hours for $60 US, which I think would be enough time for one of the waterfalls, or you could do 4 hours for $110 US, which should be good for both. And of course, bring some friends or family with you so you can split that cost up, because for us, it really wasn't so bad. Evan invited his friend Christian to join us that day too, so between 3 people, it was only $36 each for 4 hours. Likewise, it made canoeing, which we chose to do over kayaking, a hell of a lot easier. Upon your arrival, you'll check in with a member of staff and they'll take you down to the marina on Bear Creek Lake. It's a super smooth and easy process, and then you'll be down on your merry way. As someone who has very little experience canoeing or kayaking, things like this are incredibly special to me. If you're out and about for hours like we were, it's no doubt a grind, but it's also incredibly rewarding, and the views out here were spectacular. Bear Creek Lake is surrounded on all sides by mountains and the occasional steep cliff. Once you're near this island, you'll hook a left and head straight all the way until you reach the first of a few divots in the lake. This is where Souls Creek spills into it, and once you arrive, you'll have to park your canoe or kayak somewhere along the creek. We dragged it up on a hill, but be very careful where you place it as you don't want it rolling back into the lake, as in that case you'd get stranded without any cell service. From here, you'll spot a narrow trail heading upstream where there's definitely a good deal of rock scrambling and maneuvering around logs, but nothing too difficult. The entire group was immediately taken aback by how massive Souls Creek Falls was, at nearly 120 feet tall. It's got a fascinating shape with 2 tiers and a stunning location in a gorge. Plus, the flow rate was excellent, which is actually kind of a surprise looking back at my footage, since as you'll come to find out, many of the other waterfalls we'd visit in North Carolina weren't all too powerful at the time.
I can't believe no one talks about this. This is one of the best waterfalls in North Carolina, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think there's a whole nother waterfall we still have to do too. Crazy.
I've been to a lot of waterfalls in North Carolina, and this is easily one of the best. I mean, just look at this. It's just insane.
To us, Souls Creek Falls was absolutely worth coming for in and of itself, but our heart set on yet another waterfall that could potentially rival it. We carried on and resumed canoeing. We made our way further up the lake into another divot and attempted to dock up, but luck wasn't on our side this time. There were tons of logs in the way and no way to safely get out near the mouth of Flat Creek.
Oh my gosh. There's no good way to dock this one to get to this waterfall. This is...
We did eventually manage to make it back onto land, but docking here was far more challenging and we couldn't even find a trail. For whatever reason, it didn't even cross my mind that we could be lost, and I think the others just agreed, since the assumption was that Flat Creek Falls was even less visited than Souls Creek Falls. We'd even read somewhere that the path to get there was unmaintained with water crossings, but I don't think that was exactly true. More on that in a second.
Woo! These crossings are cold!
We must have gone upstream for half an hour, climbing up slippery, large boulders and through waist-deep water. I wasn't feeling good about our chances of seeing Flat Creek Falls, and then we looked at Google Maps and realized we weren't even close. With our canoe return time ticking away at us, we made the decision to turn back around and retrace our steps, as we didn't want to be overcharged, or far worse, injured.
Despite our best efforts, Flat Creek Falls, we just don't think it's happening. We've had to cross a bunch of times. We think we might have contracted poison ivy. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it was just too difficult. There's too many creek crossings, too many ways. There's no defined trail. On the review we saw, there was supposed to be some trail somewhere, but we haven't found it.
Maybe it was washed up by a hurricane or something.
And we got to return the canoe at some point. So for us, I don't think it's going to be worth it. We got so many other waterfalls that we're going to see today, so I think we're just going to head back.
Despite any disappointment from not being able to see Flat Creek Falls, we were relieved to make it back to the canoe and decided to enjoy all the remaining time we had on Bear Creek Lake. It's hard to be upset when your view looks like this. Even if these waterfalls didn't exist, I'd say it's worth it to get out on the water, just maybe for a slightly reduced fare. Now, I have no way to confirm this, but from asking staff and doing a little bit of post-trip research, we pieced together that the actual trail to Flat Creek Falls may have been directly behind that aforementioned island. That would make it far more approachable to access if we did ever decide to return, which I'm sure will happen at some point.
I feel like we just survived something. That was unbelievable. Canoeing is tough, guys. It really is. Even though we didn't get to see both waterfalls, the one we saw was incredible, and just being on the lake like that, this is unreal. This is definitely one of my favorite experiences I've ever had in nature, on the east especially.
Just the canoeing on the lake was worth it, and then you add in Souls Creek Falls and everything. That experience was so top tier. That was so cool.
Carrying on with our day, we made a 40-minute drive out of Bear Lake Reserve and deep into the Nantahala National Forest. There's actually a whole bunch of waterfalls right off of Highway 281 northeast of the property, starting with Upper Souls Creek Falls. That's right, there's yet another fall along the same creek that feeds Souls Creek Falls, only this one is a fair bit easier to get to. There's no big lot dedicated to this waterfall, just some roadside parking and a tucked away trail that makes its way into the woods and up the creek.
Evan, where'd you take us to?
This is supposed to be Upper Souls Creek Falls. It's pretty hidden, but it's supposed to have markers and it's supposed to lead us through Souls Creek back into another waterfall.
The Upper Souls Creek Falls trail is less than a half a mile round trip and mostly flat, but despite its minuscule length and lack of elevation gain, it's actually rated moderate on all trails due to a variety of factors. First of all, I'd suggest downloading an offline map of this trail since there are a few creek crossings that aren't too challenging or deep, but they do complicate things, so otherwise you better be really good at route finding. Two, there's a surprisingly narrow section that has a steep drop off on the left-hand side, which I found shocking considering how mellow the maintained parts of this hike were. So it's definitely inconsistent in that way, but if you keep your mindset on the prize, it won't be long until you make it to the rather interesting cascade that is Upper Souls Creek Falls.
Well, it's not quite as cool as the lower falls. It's still really awesome that we were able to make it here.
This is a little bit hard to find, but not as hard to find as Flat Creek Falls, and so yeah, we were able to just kind of weave our way through the forest and found this waterfall, and man, what an awesome waterfall this is.
And it's not that long of a hike, so I think you can do it.
Upper Souls Creek Falls is a lot smaller than the lower falls at just 65 feet high, and even less if you subtract the lower tier that gradually drops down to the creek. But that doesn't mean it isn't worth checking out, as it's got a unique shape and equally as beautiful location. Also, I liked how interactive this one was, as you have the ability to climb up to the base of the upper tier. Overall, a very pleasant waterfall, but it's rather forgettable in the grand scheme of things. Just 10 minutes down the road is the trailhead for Paradise Falls, the first touristy, popular fall that I'll be covering in this video, but also one that's worthy of its heavy crowds. Like Upper Souls Creek Falls, this is just a half a mile round trip, but this time you'll be pretty much scaling the side of a mountain to reach it. It starts with a decently steep downhill, but nothing too treacherous, before reaching Wolf Creek. Unfortunately, yes, there is another crossing. That said, under normal conditions, you may be able to stay dry by rock hopping. You'll then regain any of the elevation you lost and proceed along a flat section of trail. We noticed the trail split off to the left, which I'll get back to in a second, but we figured the main trail would take us to the waterfall, not some spur. And technically that was true, but only the very top of it, where a lot of people like to swim and hang out. It was cool to see all of the natural infinity pools and things like that, get a good look at the sheer drop of Paradise Falls, but man, it was tough to get down here. I was surprised by how challenging of a hike this was for how short it was, especially considering all the people here, but that was before I saw what it took to get to the base of the waterfall. That spur trail from before that we didn't think much of turned out to be the correct way of getting to the bottom, and that somehow was even steeper, with ropes to help you along the way. I couldn't believe how many visitors managed to complete this, as I myself, who I'd consider a pretty experienced hiker, had a somewhat tough time. Fortunately, it was extremely worth conquering, as this ended up being one of my favorite spots ever in North Carolina.
This is so hard to beat for me. I've never seen a waterfall exactly like this. The way it's like wedged in between these two rocks. You have a bunch of people cliff jumping. The watercolor here is amazing. This is, to me, the best waterfall of the day.
I think it's awesome, man. Just the way it's wedged here. The water here is so clear. Oh man, this is so cool.
It isn't just the 100-foot height that makes Paradise Falls for me. It's the location, specifically everything I pointed to in that vlog clip. It's probably one of the most unconventional settings I've seen for a waterfall, and I loved how many people were taking advantage of that. Many, including Evan's friend Christian, decided to send a cliff jump into the pool in front of the falls, which was pretty badass. Its name, Paradise Falls, couldn't be any more fitting, that's for sure. 25 minutes further down the road on Lake Toxaway is the start to the Toxaway River Trail, which has another few waterfalls along it. We'd make this our last hike of the day, 3 miles round trip to Raven Rock Falls. This can be done as a loop or an out and back, and I'll go over both options momentarily. This was a surprisingly quiet hike with just one other vehicle in the parking lot, and that surprised us considering its location near some much more popular areas such as Gorgeous State Park. If you recall, I went there last summer so I could check out Rainbow Falls, one of my previous favorite waterfalls in the state. Spoiler alert, Raven Rock Falls isn't quite as good as Rainbow Falls or even most of the other waterfalls we've covered so far in the video, but I'd still encourage a visit to someone who has time to kill, so let's walk through the hike. Pretty early on, the trail splits and you'll have the option to either follow the creek or walk up and down hills. Personally, I found the upper trail unenjoyable and poorly designed until the end, where it admittedly picks up. You spend most of the time walking through the Nantahala National Forest, which is pleasant but offers no change in scenery for the entirety of the hike. But yeah, I did love this bridge as it passes behind a gentle waterfall. They call it the Bridge of Death, and I understand where it gets its name from now because I actually hit my head on the rock directly above it. Still, I found it to be a fun feature that spices things up just before Raven Rock Falls. Backtracking to the lower trail, this is technically much more difficult with potentially challenging route finding and rock hopping, but it's also a lot more fun and scenic. If I did this hike again, I'd no doubt take this out and back, especially since you get an extra named waterfall out of it called Fisher Falls. Aside from its unusual shape, it's nothing all that impressive, but still a nice compliment to the scene and a contributing factor as to why I'd pick the lower trail over the upper one. Sure, Raven Rock Falls isn't the tallest waterfall you'll see in the Carolinas at just 45 feet high, but I just love the look of this one. It's comprised of two completely different drops, the upper one being your more conventional straight drop and the lower one descending along satisfying slanted rock layers. It comes together as a really nice full package, so I'd consider it to be underrated for sure.
Raven Rock Falls is actually really great. I'm impressed. The upper trail to get here wasn't so well designed.
Yeah, it was a slog to get here just because we're tired and hungry, but man, this waterfall's really cool. What a hidden gem here.
On the other side of Lake Toxaway, closer to Gorgeous State Park, is where all the vacation rentals and fancy resorts are, plus an incredible Mexican restaurant that was recommended to us by Evan.
We are so wiped out from all the hiking today, and we came to a restaurant that I'm actually shocked is so popular considering how remote this is, but this looks really good.
Yeah, I'm starving, man, so hopefully this is really good.
What's this called?
I don't know.
How do you pronounce this? Los
Vaqueros.
Vaqueros Mexican restaurant. It looks great. Has a crazy high review.
I ordered a fajita and thought it was shockingly good considering we were in North Carolina. And from the restaurant, you can look out and see yet another waterfall. So what do you know? While we're waiting for our food to arrive, Christian stays back and Evan and I go run over to the falls to get a quick look before sundown. This is called Toxaway Falls, and it was a little confusing to access designated viewpoints of it. First, we tried sneaking around some homes to get an upper view, which I don't think would have qualified as trespassing, but it definitely felt like somewhere we weren't supposed to be. So then we headed back up to the restaurant and noticed a trail along the way that we stupidly bypassed. There was a sign here that warned of trespassing, but I think that was to prevent people from parking on the side of the road. The trail itself was very, very chill.
If it says no access to falls, that's how you know there's access to the fall.
Toxaway Falls is a super impressive waterfall at 240 feet tall, and it's interesting how it slides over some very colorful bedrock, but it's not an immersive spot whatsoever, and it only exists as a result of a dam, so I really didn't care as much for it as I probably should have.
Cool waterfall next to the Mexican restaurant we're eating at. This is really, really neat. Quintessential North Carolinian waterfall, the way it flows off of that smooth rock. And in general, today's been fantastic. Today was extreme though, I will say that much. We did a lot of tough stuff, so hopefully the next couple days are a little bit more smooth sailing.
Now for day 2, we'd remain in North Carolina and we hit a bunch more waterfalls in the same general area we were in yesterday. Panthertown Valley is a pretty well-known part of the Nantahala National Forest, and for good reason. It just feels so lush and enchanting. We'd be hiking from the Cold Mountain Gap trailhead where there's a number of out and back options, or you can combine it all into a big loop. Well, supposedly. This is what we tried to do, but we ran into some problems finding the trail, so maybe stray away from that option. The most popular waterfall here is Schoolhouse Falls, which can be accessed by an easy 2.5 mile round trip hike, but we found ourselves prioritizing the less trafficked waterfall trail that you'll find by walking down the unpaved access road, and it's another 2.5 mile or so route to Greenland Creek Falls. It's similarly flat with just a few bits of steep uphill, and the weather was quite different today. I actually loved experiencing this hike in the rain as it added a nice ambiance to the forest. Eventually you meet with Greenland Creek, but otherwise there's not much of a change in scenery. The falls were a pleasant surprise though, with a classic North Carolinian look to it. I love how it flows off that smooth rock face and is split into 2 tiers. Its cumulative height is about 50 feet high, but this is a great example of a waterfall where size is not everything. And a lot like Upper Souls Creek Falls, and even Raven Rock Falls to an extent, I enjoyed a climb up to the upper tier for an added perspective. Now the loop we attempted to do passes by a smaller waterfall that drops the creek by probably 15 feet. It's called Max Falls, and apparently there's yet another right after that called Pothole Falls downstream. But before we could even get to Pothole Falls, we started losing sight of the trail despite following our offline All Trails map. I assume this one was damaged by Hurricane Helene last year, which was my original guess as to why we couldn't find Flat Creek Falls. We ended up just retracing our steps to get back on the more defined trail to the parking lot, only adding a little bit of mileage and elevation gain.
All right, that was the trail to Grassland Creek Falls, and we stopped at a couple other smaller cascades along the way as well. We got pretty backtracked on this trail though, so we ended up just making it a loop back to the parking lot, and now we're gonna go all the way to Schoolhouse Falls on a separate trail.
Yeah, we kind of got a little lost trying to get to Schoolhouse Falls, and so we decided to just come back up to the parking lot and head this way. But Grassland Creek Falls is really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing Schoolhouse Falls since this is probably the most famous waterfall in this area.
Getting to Schoolhouse Falls is a piece of cake, as you'll be trekking along a wide and maintained bike path. As you near the waterfall, the trail begins to narrow in and head into the bushes, but that's your indication you've just about made it. There's a little bit of a crossing from here, not sure if we took a wrong turn or not, but it didn't matter to us because there it was. Schoolhouse Falls is awesome, not because of its size or stature, but its location. The way this elegantly flows into a large circular pool is breathtaking, and I've heard it's popular for a swimming spot in the summer. Not an especially memorable waterfall by any means, but one that I really enjoyed nonetheless.
Schoolhouse Falls is really cool. I think this one is quite popular because it's a swimming hole too, just like Paradise Falls, which we did earlier on in the video. I think Greenland Creek Falls was the highlight for me though.
Yeah, I think that's actually the best waterfall, even though that's lesser known.
Alright, so this next spot just irks me thinking about it, and that's not an attitude I often have or share on this channel. But the Dismal Falls Trail, man, All Trails is completely full of itself calling this a moderate hike. It's roughly 5 miles round trip, give or take, and it's one of the most difficult things I've put myself through physically and mentally. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because the first half of this isn't too bad at all. Dismal Falls is another Panthertown Valley hike accessed by an overgrown but surprisingly smooth and short gravel road. There's no signage to be seen anywhere. Once you arrive at the trailhead, you'll see room for 2 or 3 vehicles and a gate that marks the beginning of this adventure. Now, despite the several creek crossings and down trees you'll see along the way, this really isn't too difficult for quite a while. The crossings are easy to stay dry on, easily navigable by rock hopping, and the trees can be climbed over or under. It's also totally flat, and there's a number of small waterfalls that serve as an appetizer for what's to come. Namely, Aunt Sally's Falls is a gentle 30-footer that I did like, but my issue with these is they're all accessed by spurs off the main trail. This not only makes things confusing, but adds a good chunk of mileage on top of what All Trail suggests. After you've completed the first half of the Dismal Falls Trail, you begin your ascent up a huge mountain. It starts off not so bad as you make it up to Lower Rhapsody Falls, a nice 30-foot tall cascade. It, alongside many of the other waterfalls on this hike, weren't flowing the best, but I still appreciated that it kept things decently engaging. The trail then gets a little bit steeper and narrows in a bunch. It got to the point where it became increasingly difficult to spot the trail, as it was basically engulfed by bushes, and standing upright would mean whacking your head against some leaves. And indeed, we did get backtracked a handful of times. Eventually, it was good to see Upper Rhapsody Falls though, as that reassured us that we were heading the right way. This is definitely the best of the falls so far at 70 feet high. It's got a straight drop to the bottom, and the greenery around it is stunning. You can climb down to its base if you so desire, but we decided against it. This is where I'd advise anyone doing this hike to turn around. Up to this point, I think there is an argument to be made that it could be worth your time, although there are so many better waterfall hikes in the region to be fair. Sure, the best falls on the Dismal Falls Trail have yet to come, but following Upper Rhapsody, it becomes obscenely steep and overgrown. Like seriously, that on the left is the trail. Eventually you'll reach a split in the trail, and once again there's no signage anywhere that indicates what I'm about to tell you. Left goes down to Lower Dismal Falls, and straight goes to the actual Dismal Falls waterfall. We headed left and had no choice but to utilize these ropes, as they were the only way to safely kill off the elevation we basically just climbed. It was incredibly sketchy, and all I could think about was how frustrating it was going to be to get back up. Moving on was one of the cooler parts of the hike though. It's not saying a whole lot since it looks the same more or less the entire time, but these mossy cliffs were quite awesome and reminded me of something you might see in further north parts of the country like Ohio, think Cuyahoga Valley National Park. As we were admiring these formations, the trail suddenly disappeared from beneath us, and before we knew it, we were walking on slippery boulders and across streams to get to Lower Dismal Falls. Route finding during this section was nearly impossible, I found, and the uphill was grueling as there was numerous instances where we'd have to pull our body weight up rock. There's also no viewing area to take in the waterfall, so you've got to be very careful with your footing. I did think this was a cool fall despite its unimpressive 30-foot height. It does look bigger on video than it does in person, I'd say, but it had the best flow of all the waterfalls on this hike, which I was surprised by. Now, believe it or not, Upper Falls are pretty much just right above this, but since there's no way to continue up the creek from this point, you'll have to go all the way back to where that intersection was. That makes Lower Dismal Falls a pretty huge detour, when perhaps they could have just built a connector trail utilizing stairs or even one of those ropes or a ladder to make it a loop.
So as you can see, there is a trail split here. We were under the impression that going down this lower trail would basically grant you a view of the entire waterfall, and that going to the upper trail would grant you a view of the main tier of the waterfall, the upper part. What we didn't expect was there to be separate lower and upper falls, and that lower falls, while cool, definitely in my opinion was not quite worth the effort that we just put into that. It was legitimately sketchy and probably one of the toughest sections of hike I think I've ever done.
Yeah, that was my bad. I thought going down there, I was hoping to avoid the upper trail that we didn't have to do any more elevation gain, but oh man, that was tough. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. The waterfall at the end there was cool, but not worth the trouble to get down there.
Yeah, we got to crank through this last little bit, and then hopefully we'll finally be at Dismal Falls.
We continued up the mountain at a swift pace to knock out any of the elevation we had left to conquer, but this was remarkably tough on our legs. I couldn't believe it. By far one of the steepest sections of any hike I've done that doesn't incorporate ropes or something to assist you. Then we reached the top of the mountain thinking we were basically done and had a short flat walk to go before the end. Yeah, that couldn't have been any more wrong. This last quarter of a mile might have been the steepest section of trail I've ever seen in my life. The ropes do come back, which helps, but it just doesn't matter. We felt so defeated, and this single-handedly propelled the hike to rank in our top 3, maybe number 1 hardest we've ever done. The 150-foot Dismal Falls was a rewarding one to say the least, as it is admittedly quite impressive. The main drop up top is satisfying as it descends straight down, a lot like Upper Rhapsody Falls, then it transitions to a series of violent cascades that seem to go on forever. Not to mention the layering of rock beneath is mesmerizing, but with all that being said, never ever again.
This is an awesome waterfall, but that hike, I just can't get it out of my mind. That was the hardest thing I've ever done on the east, if not one of the hardest hikes I've done, period.
Yeah, this waterfall is awesome, but man, it is just too difficult to get here. I would never do it again and wouldn't really recommend it.
When we made it back to our car, I couldn't have been more glad that this hike was over. I felt starving and totally dead, but we fueled ourselves with some snacks and continued chugging along because there was a small handful of stops we wanted to make while we were in the area, especially since it was still decently early. We drove 40 minutes east towards Brevard and hopped on Highway 276, which has several very famous waterfalls along it. But despite that, I might say Canesti Falls is its most underrated, which is ironic with it being located within a community and the adjacent land being relatively developed as well. There's a publicly accessible upper overlook, and this observation deck provides what might just be the most unique waterfall view in the state. I say that because this isn't one waterfall, it's actually 2. There's one out in the distance and one beneath you, and they're both huge too. I believe just one of the falls total to 85 feet. I'm unsure about a combined height, but what I do know is they eventually meet in this large pool hidden in this sinkhole looking thing. Sadly, there isn't a good way to see the inside of it or even get a close-up look at the distant fall, but I think it would be possible if you were in that community somehow.
It's a little bit of a shame you can only get the one view of Canesti Falls, but this is just, oh my god, I've never seen a waterfall that looks like this. 2 big cascades flowing into each other, meeting in the middle.
Yeah, it's an awesome waterfall. I just wish you'd get more viewpoints of it because it just had this one here. I think if I could see it from the lower viewpoint or something like that, it'd be unbelievable.
One of North Carolina's most popular waterfalls is Looking Glass Falls, which by extension means it's super easy to access. There's tons of roadside parking and several viewing opportunities. The upper observation platform requires no effort to get to at all, and it's fantastic, but in my opinion, you can't get a feel of the true scale of Looking Glass Falls without getting down to its base. Follow the steps to the bottom and you will be enamored by one of my new favorites in North Carolina without question.
Sometimes these ultra popular spots don't live up to the hype, but I have to say Looking Glass Falls is really impressive. I was not expecting it to be this big.
Yeah, I've been here many times and never disappoints. It's such an amazing waterfall and so iconic.
Looking Glass Falls stands 60 feet tall, which isn't especially large for this part of the country, but its flow rate was outstanding, and I think it's got one of the coolest locations for a waterfall in the state. The rock outcropping to the side of it is just awesome, and I always appreciate when you can get all sorts of different angles, so the fact that you've got that upper view, those side views, and multiple base views enables you to fully appreciate this one.
In addition to being just really accessible, and I think another reason this is such a popular spot is because you also have Looking Glass Rock nearby, which is something we'll definitely have to come back for. It's one of North Carolina's most iconic mountain hikes.
It shouldn't come as a surprise that we were absolutely sick of hiking at this point in the day, but Moore Cove Falls is situated directly next to Looking Glass Falls, and it's just a mile round trip with little to no elevation gain. Therefore, I am glad I pushed myself to see it just this once. It is a super easy hike. Compared to nearly all of the waterfalls we'd seen these past 2 days, Moore Cove Falls is just okay, but we wanted to check it out since it's a rare Carolinian waterfall that you can walk behind. The Forest Service did a good job working the trail into the underside of this rock overhang, but it's a super gentle fall at the end of the day and not particularly big, so therefore skippable if you're short on time.
Day 2 really kept with the theme of just intense experiences, aside from the last 2 spots which have been a cakewalk and are very popular for a reason.
And now it's finally time for our 3rd day in the Carolinas, my personal favorite of the 3, where we branch into a new state.
It's our third and final day here in the Carolinas chasing waterfalls.
Yeah, so this is a really cool spot right off I-40. Today we're heading down to South Carolina after this, but this is right on the way for us, and so we just wanted to stop off and show Mark this because this is one of the coolest waterfalls in all of North Carolina.
Evan is very local to Catawba Falls, so he's been a bunch of times, but having seen his pictures before, it's a spot I really wanted to highlight in this video. Now there's a few ways you can customize your hike, but we did the 3.5 miles out and back to Upper Catawba Falls. The river trail is quite stunning as it hugs Catawba River, and the wildflower bloom was quite beautiful too. They also throw in a few bridges, which I'm always a fan of. Up to Lower Catawba Falls, the trail is relatively flat with some gradual up and down hill, but from that point, difficulty definitely does ramp up significantly. But it doesn't bother me as much when I'm engaged by my surroundings or a unique trail design, and that's what I love about this hike is it combines both of those things the whole rest of the way up. The lower viewpoint is absolutely phenomenal, by the way, as you look up at more than 200 feet of cascades. It's honestly hard to even call it a singular waterfall. There's water going every which way. Anyways, this begins the 500 feet of elevation gain in just a half a mile, and if you're afraid of heights, these stairways can be pretty intimidating. I really enjoyed them myself as I thought it gave this hike a lot of character, and for a change you can actually look back and enjoy some mountain views too. Upper Catawba Falls is roughly 80 feet in and of itself and has a super cool shape to it. The pool it spills into is absolutely breathtaking, and we were even lucky to catch some rainbows here. For a shorter waterfall hike, this trail has it all, and it's for that reason that it's definitely one of my favorite hikes in this state now.
Catawba Falls easily exceeded expectations. This is a must-do hike in North Carolina. It's not too long. It's honestly not even that hard because you have the steps along the way to help you out, as opposed to some of the other hikes we've been doing on this trip, which has just been grueling switchbacks or steep uphill.
Yeah, I love this. This is so cool. The cascades at the bottom, walking up the stairs is so cool. It's like a million waterfalls you get to see, and then this final payoff with this final waterfall up here is unbelievable. It's so cool. This place is definitely one of the top spots in North Carolina.
At last, it was time to head to South Carolina, which was actually my most anticipated stretch of these 3 days because from what I recall, this state sliver of the Appalachian Mountains is incredibly underrated. That extends to its waterfalls too. Most of the ones I'd seen here were unorthodox for one reason or another.
We're at Caesar's Head State Park. I have no idea why I didn't come here the last time I was in the Carolinas, but I wanted to show you guys this. Caesar's Head State Park also contains Ravencliff Falls. And if you remember, Ravencliff Falls is a waterfall I did go to in that Carolinas video from last year, so that's really, really cool. So technically I've been to this state park, but I haven't seen the actual Caesar's Head formation, so I'm really looking forward to it, as well as all the mountain views.
Yes, I know this video is supposed to be all about waterfalls, but there were 2 mountain viewpoints in South Carolina that we couldn't pass up since they were basically right on the way. In addition to containing Ravencliff Falls, Caesar's Head State Park stands out for its awesome overlook area with so many interesting features. For one, the mountains are stunning around here, especially the distant Table Rock, which is a hike I have high on my Carolinas bucket list. There's a lot of peaks in these 2 states where a large majority consist of exposed granite. You see this at places like Chimney Rock State Park, which I went to last year, and the aforementioned Looking Glass Rock. And of course, you're directly on top of yet another example, but you don't realize it until you walk down into this slot canyon. The state park managed to design a trail into a tight passageway, and it's a lot of fun to traverse. The boulders you walk between are a small part of this massive granite making up the overlook area, and if you look closely, you can see the Caesar's Head formation in said rock. This part of the park is so worth your time and doesn't take much of it to see, so don't make the mistake I did by skipping it. Heading west, we made a 40-minute drive around the backside of Table Rock to the next handful of stops, including our first South Carolinian waterfall in this video. Twin Falls is a seriously underrated waterfall that requires very little effort to see. It's a short, non-paved road through a residential area and a 0.7-mile round-trip hike. Honestly, even calling this a hike would be a stretch. It's totally flat and anyone can do it regardless of their physique. Twin Falls absolutely blew me away as it's really 2 waterfalls as the name implies. The one on the left contains a 75-foot straight drop, and the one on the right has a smaller drop followed by a gradual slope. Both meet at the creek below, and it's extremely satisfying to see it all in one field of vision. And it's conveniently located near the access road to the state's high point, which we'd be checking out next. Sassafras Mountain does take a while to reach since you're on windy roads much of the time, but it's definitely worth it once you're there. It's got a sizable parking lot at the top that I don't think would ever fill up, and a short, easy walk to an observation platform. And what's more, this state high point threads the border with both Carolinas, which is a fun novelty being able to say that you were in 2 states at once. Sassafras Mountain rises 3,553 feet above sea level and offers panoramic views of the Blue Ridge Mountains, including even higher peaks on the North Carolina side of the border. Even though this isn't that high compared to many other state high points, you feel like you're on top of the world relative to the smaller hills on the South Carolina side, so all in all, this is an incredible spot.
It's been a thing as of late for me to check off state high points, and this is South Carolina's high point here on Sassafras Mountain. This is absolutely excellent. Panoramic views all around us.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's so cool up here.
And also I realized that we forgot to do a review for Twin Falls, which is just down the road. Also phenomenal spot. I absolutely love Twin Falls.
Yeah, these both are on the same road, so you can definitely hit both in the same day, and both are really cool spots. Twin Falls is just an awesome waterfall, and then you couple it with doing this, and yeah, it makes for a really good day.
Another 40 minutes west takes us to the Station Cove Falls Trail, which is 1.7 miles round trip dramatic but completely flat. It's a pleasant walk through the woods that you can crank through really quickly, and that's something about South Carolina's waterfalls that I really appreciate. Almost none of the ones I've been to are even remotely challenging hikes. This is one hell of a waterfall too, with one of the most peculiar shapes I've seen, and I absolutely love the way it flows. On one side it's so gentle, and on the other it's raging. Station Cove Falls is quite large too, with its width no doubt exceeding its 60-foot height.
Station Cove Falls is literally one of the most unique waterfalls I've ever seen. It's one of my favorites in the Carolinas for sure. I love this. You'll remember I saw Yellow Branch Falls in my last Carolinas video. It really reminds me of this a lot, actually.
Station Cove Falls likely would have been one of my favorites in South Carolina, but that was before Issaquena Falls took the same concept and dialed things up to 11. This one is located yet another 20 minutes west, actually right across the street from the trailhead to Yellow Branch Falls, which I did last year and mentioned earlier on in the video. That was kind of my introduction to these ultra unique South Carolinian waterfalls that have all those terraces. What's bizarre is that hike's actually quite long, whereas Issaquena Falls hardly requires any effort to see. So that's why I think it's weird I skipped this last time. You simply park up, walk under a covered bridge, which I thought was pretty cool, and bam, there's your overlook. Admittedly, the falls aren't anything special from up top, so take the steep, unmaintained trail down to the bottom if you can, because down there, I was blown away. Issaquena Falls is just an art piece, almost looking like a combination of Station Cove Falls and Yellow Branch Falls. It's got a height of 100 feet, a pretty dramatic width, and I just love how it gently topples over layer after layer.
Issaquena Falls is unbelievable. This is like the last one we saw, but on steroids. I'm blown away. One of my favorite waterfalls, again, in the Carolinas. Probably like top 3, honestly.
This waterfall's amazing. It's definitely like Yellow Branch. It's on that same level, and man, it's definitely one of the best waterfalls in all of the Carolinas.
Literally right across the street, don't forget to pay a visit to the Stump House Tunnel. This is totally random and weird, but it's awesome that it's become a tourist attraction.
Okay, what exactly are we working with here?
So this was an old train tunnel that never got finished, and now you can just walk through it. This is Stump House Tunnel, so let's head in.
Approximately 1/4 of Stump House Tunnel is open to the public, and it's a neat family-friendly option if you happen to already be in the area for waterfalls and things of that sort. The tunnel maintains a constant temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was a great way to escape the heat, and I'll never get tired of experiencing absolute darkness, which you typically only get on cave tour, so that was pretty fun as well. Finally, and I know it sounds unreal, but to conclude the video, let's see Brasstown Falls, 30 minutes west, right along the border with Georgia. This is another spot with an unpaved access road, but it's really well maintained, so no worries at all, and it's also quite the easy hike at 0.8 miles round trip. The first portion is almost entirely flat as you make your way through the forest to the upper falls. That's what makes this trail especially worth it, is there's numerous tiers visible in a short distance. And you start off with a bang, as Upper Brasstown Falls is one of those wide, elegant waterfalls that I've really fallen in love with in South Carolina. The 60-foot gem has a beautifully lush location, and it already would have been worth a stop to see it on its own. But then you make your way downstream, and the trail's a lot of fun with its steps and observation platforms. Each one allows you to view a particularly sizable drop in Brasstown Creek, and those last two are going to be your middle and lower tiers. Middle Brasstown Falls might only be 20 feet tall, but it's got a satisfying, defined shape, and the flow rate was excellent. There's an unmaintained spur trail you can take to the base of it, which I thought was really cool. There you get a good feel of the waterfall's power, and we got another rainbow out of it as well. The final stretch of the hike takes you to the base of the lower falls, and they had a field day designing this. The steep steps and ladders were a blast to traverse, and I wish more hikes, short or long, had elements such as this. They didn't even have a good reason to do it here, but it totally added to my opinion of the overall experience. Lower Brasstown Falls is only about 30 feet tall, but it's more so special for its location in this grotto-esque environment. The mossy rocks are so cool, and the giant pool spectacular. Every single tier of this waterfall exceeded expectations, and getting to each was a fun time, so what's not to love?
Brasstown Falls blew me away. What an incredible last stop. The upper falls alone were worth it. Then we got to the middle falls, and I was like, wow, this is really one of the best waterfall hikes in the Carolinas. And then we got to the lower one, which is definitely the weakest, but it's in such a cool location, and the trail design is so much fun. It's so interactive. I have nothing bad to say, except for maybe some of the views are a little bit blocked by trees, but that's a minor nitpick. The rest of this has been absolutely a phenomenal experience.
To wrap up day 3, we had a barbecue restaurant on our radar, but sadly it wasn't open, so we had to think of a plan B.
Okay, so there's a really cool barbecue spot nearby. Unfortunately, it's only open Fridays and Saturdays, and we're one day off. It's a Thursday today, so that's closed. But we did drive by this taco shop, which looks basically just as good, so we are really excited for this. We've been going to taco trucks on basically all of our hiking trips, and we love these things.
There's nothing better than a banger meal after a loaded day of hiking, so shout out to Tequila El Rosario. Not sure if I'm saying that right. Not sure what this place is doing out in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, Florida, but this was some legit Mexican food.
That was freaking awesome, and what a great way to conclude a phenomenal video. The Carolinas is a region of the country that I absolutely love for waterfalls especially, so this was a ton of fun to see a lot of obscure ones, a lot of iconic ones, and today is seeing some really, really underrated ones in South Carolina. I almost think South Carolina's variety of waterfalls is as impressive, maybe even a little more impressive than North Carolina's. Certainly it doesn't have the quantity, but these are all so impressive and so unique.
Yeah, these last 3 days have been amazing exploring the Carolinas and seeing all these waterfalls from hidden gems to really popular spots. And yeah, I definitely think some of the South Carolina waterfalls blew me away, maybe even a little bit more than some of the North Carolina waterfalls, but still both areas are absolutely amazing. We saw so many waterfalls in so many amazing places, so yeah, what a great couple of days.
And you might think we're waterfalled out, but actually that's far from the truth. We've got a bunch of videos planned from Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee with loads more waterfalls, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.